and coastal communities at the heart of the Levelling Up agenda.
My Lords, it's a pleasure to follow the Noble Earl, the Earl of Devon, and to echo his concern about the lack of environmental ambitions expressed in the bill, which I think we'll get to also in the next group. In my first contribution in committee, I declare my position as Vice President of the Local Government Association to cover other contributions in this committee stage. And I thank the Noble Lord, Lord Foster, for his powerful expert introduction to this group. I will just speak briefly to offer the Green Group's support for the general direction of all of these amendments, but I particularly want to focus on the Amendment 5 in the name of the Noble Lady Baroness Mackintosh of Pickering, ably introduced by the Noble Duke, the Duke of Montrose. And that talks about looking at the disparities between urban and rural areas. And the Noble Lord, Lord Foster, talked about the different needs of different areas. But I think it's really important that when we think about this levelling up, we actually see ambitions for equal services for people all around these islands. And just reflecting on some of the experiences I've had in some smaller communities. Clun, which is a tiny, absolute picture-perfect postcard village in southwest Shropshire, over near the Wales border. And when I visited a decade ago, it was, the locals believed, the smallest place in the UK with a food bank, which was operating out of the church. And one of the people who was a volunteer working at that food bank told me that until he got involved in this food bank, he'd never believed that anyone would need a food bank in Clun. And he was absolutely deeply shocked by the level of need and the experiences he'd encountered. So there is that desperate need for essential support services. Now, I don't think we should rest until the last food bank closes because of lack of demand, but we need to put other services in to help the people who are now relying on those food banks. Another issue that's a problem that's an issue for so many of these areas is the fact that policies designed for cities and urban areas get imposed on rural areas. And I think about visiting North Norfolk and visiting a school there, and the schools in the area had imposed on them the idea of specialist schools. Isn't it great if pupils can choose to go to a sports academy or a language specialising school? Except the bus services. Each village only had one bus service. So pupils had no kind of choice about which school they went to. They only went to the one that the bus went to. And if you were really good at sports and fancied sports and you ended up at the language school, that was just tough luck. And that was policies imposed on rural areas that are just inappropriate. And I will come back to that issue of buses because it's something that the Green Party has very close to its heart, having just announced this week our policy of a £1 fare to take you there, a fare that would be available to everyone in the country on local buses. And I think when I talk about local buses in rural areas, I often get reactions that go, well, you can't expect a bus in a rural area. It just won't work. Well, I've been in Finland, and I caught a bus in Finland into the middle of a national park, right in the middle of a national park. I went for a walk. I came back and stood at the bus stop and waited for the next bus service, which came every half hour all day in the middle of that national park. So I think, thinking about levelling up in an absolute real sense, we shouldn't be saying, oh, it's a rural area, they can't expect this, they can't expect that, and particularly that they can't expect the foundation of a bus service so that people are able to get around. It's really crucial that I think this Amendment 3 in particular of reducing disparities is really crucial. And just one final thought on this group of amendments. We've had a little bit of discussion about what the government's vision for rural areas is. And if we think about the direction of travel over decades in rural areas, the idea has been that land holdings, farms will have to get bigger and bigger and bigger, with fewer and fewer people working on them. But I would suggest that levelling up for rural areas means restoring small businesses, small farms that employ quite a lot of people. And that means then there's children to go to the school, that means there's people to get on the bus, that means the bus is there for the older people who need it who perhaps can't drive anymore. Restoring communities is about a lot more than just saying, oh, what's there and what can we support? It's about a vision.